Good evening, everybody. My name is Derek Zobler. I'll be giving a talk on, as it's been highlighted, the world's longest title for a talk, the structured threat information expression, why it became the default language of threat intelligence platforms by me, Derek Z. Quick disclaimer, going into this, you're going to notice that AI was used in the assistance of putting this together. It's going to be very obvious. That is intentional. But just because it's in everything these days, I am giving a disclaimer, just like your favorite YouTubers who should be saying this kind of stuff. But without further ado, let's get started. As with any good threat intelligence brief, it always starts with an overall classification. The overall classification for this presentation is traffic light protocol clear. You can tell all your friends about this. You are welcome to share this with the world. There are no restrictions. In fact, I encourage you to talk about this with others. This is also a permissible action protocol of clear. You can do whatever you want with this information. Feel free to set up whatever server system, doesn't matter. Have fun. So who am I? Actually, let's get AD user, because we never see enough PowerShell in these presentations. So like I said, my name is Derek. I go by post on the SecDSM Discord. I am a real person, I swear. And the rest of this information is pretty much just random gibberish and garbage. But it is true that I do work as a thrunter, or for those of you who hate that word, a threat hunter, for Berkshire Hathaway Energy, specifically with the Mid-American Energy Corporation here in Des Moines. So some of you have seen this because you've been given intelligence briefs before. This is straight from Joint Publication 2-01, Intelligence Support to Joint Operations. And it talks about an area you're working in, whether it be cyberspace, airspace, space, and talks about taking raw data and turning it into intelligence. All right, well, this is the old way. Like I said, we're going to use AI and turn it into something cool and new. So now instead of the intelligence funnel, now we have the intelligence pyramid, even though this thing is clearly wrong in some areas. But essentially the idea is you take raw data and you turn it into intelligence. The biggest piece that a lot of people, especially intelligence professionals, can struggle with in cyberspace is large amounts of data. Big data, you've heard about it. That used to be the buzzword a couple years ago, is how do we handle big data? How do we deal with all these data lakes? And so a little bit of this is geared towards that. Because you have large amounts of data that was typically structured in your classic SQL database style, you have a row with some columns or a Excel spreadsheet with a million different entries. That doesn't really help you build threat information. It's just a lot of data. So this is the part where something like STIX, or the structured threat information expression, can come in and start to build an object that gives you information that can relate to one within itself and to other objects. So what's the problem we're trying to solve? You have a data overload. That's where STIX comes in. And if you're wondering, yes, that was an attempt at the Rickroll YouTube link. Let's do that one more time just so you get the full pleasure. I told it not to do any audio for this, and so you might see people talking. I don't know why Google VO did that. But yes, this is like an infomercial for STIX. As soon as it will go to the next slide. There we go. So STIX itself wasn't the first idea. It actually came from a couple other ideas. So MITRE came up with the Cyber Observable Expression, or CyBox. STIX was eventually released a year later. The two decided, hey, we're better together, let's merge. And that's kind of what we know today as STIX 2. That was STIX 2.0. We now have it as 2.1. Basically the same, just added more stuff. The biggest changes was, one, it changed from XML. Bleh, nobody likes XML. But it changed that to JSON notation. The biggest reason is because when you're nesting stuff within JSON, it's easy to extract that and to keep that as top-level objects, which we'll see here in a little bit, versus the old XML style where every object had sub-objects under it, and it was very hard to create those relationships in a meaningful manner that was easy to visualize. So obviously XML is really good for machines to understand it, but not so great for humans to understand it. So what ends up happening is, like I was talking about with those traditional databases, those traditional ways of keeping information, had that row column, the event, it takes that row of information and turns it into a graph or a map. And now you're starting to visualize, as the human interpreting this information, you're starting to see those connections. You're starting to craft a narrative of the activity that you're seeing or activities that you're seeing across a campaign. And then you can start to build those correlations as you see the same features, the same signatures being identified in multiple activities. So in that map, it has a couple of key components. For tonight's talk, we're only going to talk about the core objects, which are the STIX domain objects, or SDOs, your STIX cyber observable objects, your SCOs, and your STIX relationship objects, your SROs. What each of those, in the simplest way possible of explaining them, means is your SDO is your context, the who, the what, and the why. And we'll see some examples of all of these a little later. Your cyber observable, that is your evidence. If anybody has ever heard of Locard's exchange principle, these are the things left behind by an attacker, by somebody who is causing some type of crime. You leave something behind when you come into the space. And finally, what is the connection between that evidence and the context? That's where those relationships come in. They connect those pieces together, and it builds out that story and shows you a map of events that have happened. So the first part, STIX domain objects. Again, the who, the what, the why. It can be anything from threat actors to malware to campaigns to vulnerabilities. There's intrusion sets, identities. There's a whole bunch of these. In all, I'm not going to cover all of them. You can go and read the specification. Again, one of those times where I actually recommend reading the manual. But these are these objects. These are a object in which describe something. Again, we're talking about the who and the why. These are going to start getting linked together with some of those pieces of evidence. So these are the facts. You've probably seen some of these before. Everybody probably knows the pyramid of pain. You've heard about IP addresses, domains, file hashes, tools, certain TTPs. These are all of those facts, things that were observed and seen. Now, we have those two objects. We need to link them in some way. Threat actor X, let's say APT threat butt, uses specific files and that they drop onto the victim device. That is exactly what it is capturing. And this can be used to connect those, or to make those relationships between multiple objects in a bundle, to even relate other bundles of objects with others. So you can have one series of activity cluster, or activity group, and link it to another activity group through a shared relationship of, let's say, that file. So let's do a practical. Let's go over a little bit of a incident that happened at very real company called Coffee Shop. Let's say that. So in this very official-looking incident report / memorandum, the security department says, we got pwned. Here's what happened. Neon Crab used a spear phishing technique to deliver a file attachment that used double file extensions to trick the user into downloading it and running it on their device. We know that this was a remote access Trojan, and this was commonly seen in a campaign known as the Deep Sea Syndicate. All right, so I've highlighted those. So remember those as we break them down and apply those to all those core objects we just talked about. The first one is we're going to extract that evidence. So the evidence being the file name, the file hash, the domain used. That is your SCO, those cyber observable objects, the facts. The next part is your context, your STIX domain objects. We know that this belongs to an intrusion set known as Neon Crab. They use a specific malware known as CrabRat. In those two pieces together is indicative of the campaign of Deep Sea Syndicate. And now putting it all together, we can see how all those relate to one another. So with this, we can now start to build the narrative of what happened. Same thing you saw in the memo in the very real coffee shop incident. We've now visualized what has happened while extracting information that can be easily shared within your own organization or with other organizations and people in your sector, or organizations in your sector. And eventually it's going to look something like this. Again, this is obviously AI generated. This is just for instructional purposes only. It will not look as, now that I look at it, very neon. That will probably not end up in a report, but this is much easier to read and understand than the JSON or the XML that you normally would have seen. And so this is what we, as the humans, can interpret to understand what happened in this incident and what to look for. And when we know what to look for, that means we have a detection engineering opportunity. Looking at those behaviors, looking at those files, you can use these STIX bundles to build out detections for these. Doesn't have to happen to you, but you can build out detections and signatures to share with others. And one more time, give it up for STIX in solving all your problems with big data. You just have to throw it in here. I'm only adding this because I asked it to make me a video. I thought it was going to be like a minute and look like a true infomercial with the grayscale where the people like dump bowls of cheese puffs. How do I handle all this data? Unfortunately, it only gave me 9 seconds and said, you can only create one more video. So you get to watch it 4 times tonight. With that, so we talked about the core concepts. You might now be thinking, okay, well, how do I deal with all that? What if my company has restrictions? Great. STIX is built with the idea, this language is built with the idea of it's going to go through multiple versions. So versioning is a part of this. It has a created time and a modified time, and I'll actually show you what that looks like here in a little bit. It's pretty cool. But it shows you how it changes over time. In addition, just like the traffic light protocol I talked about earlier, you can restrict who has access to this information. So it doesn't, not arbitrarily, it doesn't get out of your hands unknowingly. You know who it's going to be able to go to. People cannot access it without the right permission set. So key takeaways from tonight, STIX is a language. And like most languages, it connects things. It connects us. It conveys ideas. So we are taking the noise inside our heads or the noise inside the machines and turning them into signals we can communicate with others. The primary pillars of STIX, those core objects, are STIX domain objects, STIX cyber observable objects, and STIX relationship objects. Finally, you can use STIX to capture even the smallest thing. Let's say you just want to mess around with it a little bit. You can capture a bundle or an activity of one threat actor with one piece of malware. Just link them together with relationship. You have now created a STIX bundle. And you can share that or keep that for yourself and build upon that. So as I said, I promise showing some examples. Oh no. All right, well, some of my pages closed, so let me open these up real quick. But I built out some fake profiles for threat actors. There we go. So it is a little small to see, and I apologize. Let me see if I can, oh my, there we go. So this is actually on the Oasis site. Oasis is the organization that now maintains the specifications for this language. But right here, there's a timeline. So I can, as it goes down, you can see as objects get added or removed over time. And that's where that versioning comes in. And in that, you can also see the legends associated with those different objects. So we see, hey, POC firmware modification. That is an attack pattern domain object. It's related to system firmware. In addition, some other tools that have been released of relative recent time are items like MITRE's Center for Threat Informed Defense Attack Builder. So, Attack Flow Builder. So in here, and I'll share all these links at the end, in here you can use those same STIX bundles, and it's going to look ugly, but you can insert those. Let's do Cyber Avengers because of current events. Now, of course, it doesn't show the relationships between these, and it packed everything on top of each other all into one essentially level. You can move them around and create those relationships again. But this is a way that you can build out and put it into other tools to better visualize. This is a way to show your defenders and support them, hey, this is how this plays out, without having to do all of the hand jamming of each of these separate objects. Obviously, you need the relationships. That is not imported for whatever reason I cannot understand. Take it up with MITRE. That's not on me. But that is just another way that you can use this. Oh, that's the same thing. And to include, at the top of this presentation, I talked about threat intelligence platforms are using this. Here are two examples of threat intelligence platforms. Cyware uses this and even has some of their own custom or what they call extension objects. But a lot of these are going to be the exact same thing that you see in the STIX 2.1 specification. Indicators, malware, threat actor. They use the same thing, which means that not only can they ingest that information, they can export it or exfiltrate it to others as well. So that is the huge goal of threat intelligence, is sharing. Another one, Threat Connect. They do pretty much the same thing. They have their own data model. Guess what? It looks almost exactly like STIX 2.1. So these are real-world examples of how you can use this and build these out to understand and start to create and think about what's happening in these threat intelligence platforms and build out these bundles. With that, the last thing, it is not open. So if you're wondering, how do I create STIX bundles? You can always go back to Vim or V, or Nano, or Emacs, or whatever your preferred text editor is. You can hand jam this by hand if you wish. It's not really that hard. However, that's crazy. You shouldn't have to hand jam anything. Any of these platforms will let you create stuff. I'm not connected to my OpenCTI instance back at home, but I could create those same objects in something like that, an open source piece of software, where it allows me to create those objects, create a case, and start tracking that activity. So there's many different examples out there. You just have to find them. All right, so let's close this out. Here are all the references. I'm going to drop these in the Discord, so don't worry about taking a picture. These will be accessible to you. This is also a way for me to encourage you to join the Discord. If you did not get the hint earlier during the 101, definitely join the Discord. We share a lot of memes, and we talk about trains. But at this point, we would like to open up the floor for any questions. Yes, sir, in the back. Favorite paid hunting platform? So the question was, what is my favorite paid hunting platform? Thrunting platform. And what is my favorite free thrunting platform? It's actually the same answer, and it's Intel 471's hunter community. They actually have a really good service that they provide in which they build out thrunting packages for you, the customer. They do offer a community edition. Obviously, it's limited in scope and what is available to you, but the paid version has so many pre-built packages that they're constantly updating, and it's constantly getting updated with new information, much like how the Cisco CVE that was being talked about. That stuff gets pushed into a hunt package within hours, maybe a day, and they're constantly supporting customers. Intel 471 also does free threat hunting workshops. And if you go onto their site, you can sign up. You can even get a digital badge when you find the bad guys in their scenarios. So answer your question is Intel 471 Hunter platform. All right, I don't see any other hands. So just a reminder, like any good threat intelligence brief, the overall classification for this brief has been TLP clear, PAP clear. Thank you for your time.